Hi, welcome to the Brocade Campus Feature Explainer Series. I'm Terry Henry. This time around, we're going to have a look at how to migrate an HP Comware configuration to Brocade ICX. And we're just going to touch on basic VLAN configuration. So it's a VLAN with tagged and untagged ports and then an IP address on that VLAN for basic VLAN routing. So this is a pretty simple configuration. I actually pulled the Comware side directly out of their documentation, and then I built the equivalent Brocade ICX, and you'll see that the Comware command line is quite a bit different from our command line and from Cisco and from even their own HP or Aruba Provision. So in this one, we're going to look at this basic config, and then coming up there will be a couple other VLANs on a couple other videos, I should say, on HP Provision and some basic configuration migration. So let's have a look at this. So on the left column here, we have the Provision configuration. On the right side, we have the equivalent Brocade ICX. So what you're going to see, the first thing they're going to do is create VLAN 100 and assign 10 gigabit Ethernet 1/0/1 to VLAN 100. So rather than doing a configure T, configure terminal, they do something called a system view command. Doesn't really matter. And they create the VLAN with a VLAN 100, assign port 10 gigabit Ethernet 1/0/1 to it, and then quit out. Then they create this interface, VLAN interface 100, assign an IP address to it, 192.168.1.1/24, and then quit out of that. So our equivalent is, I'm assuming you're in config T already, you do a VLAN 100, you do an untagged Ethernet 1/0/1, and then later on in the Provision configuration down here, they actually configure 1/0/3 as a trunk port. So this is a separate configuration. So they go into the interface and then do a port link type trunk, and then they do a port trunk permit VLAN 100/200 on that interface. And so this is something that we do directly under the VLAN. So we've just done a tag E1/0/3, which is the equivalent to what they did directly on the interface. So I untagged 1/0/1, I tagged 1/0/3, I assigned a router interface called VE100, which now creates this interface called interface VE100 for virtual Ethernet, and I assign an IP address to the virtual Ethernet interface. So pretty simple. Then on the Provision side, then we create VLAN 200, assign it to 1/0/2, and then assign IP address 192.168.2.2/24 to that interface. So again, VLAN 200, port 10 gigabit Ethernet 1/0/2, which defaults to untagged, right? Until you create that trunk port. We quit out of that. We go to interface, VLAN interface 200. We assign the IP address to it, 192.168.2.2/24, and then you quit out of that. So again, our equivalent, VLAN 200, untag E 1/0/2, tag E 1/0/3, which again is what we did down here, right? 1/0/3, we created it as a link type trunk, and then we added it with the port trunk permit VLAN 100/200 to the interface down here. So our equivalent, we do that tagged directly on the VLAN. We create the router interface, so router interface VE200. We go into interface VE200 and assign the IP address to it. So I'm doing a CIDR mask here. I'm doing a /24, but when you go back and look in the running configuration, it will convert that back for you to a 255.255.255.0. But you could do it either way. You could just type it in that way. But on the Comware side, you do a /24. All right, and so the other thing is, right, so we already talked about this trunk, which we don't need to do that, right? That's done under the VLAN. And then lastly, on the Comware side, you have to go to the default VLAN, VLAN 1, and remove it. So on 1/0/3, you have to remove VLAN 1 from that trunk. In our case, we don't have to do that. As soon as you tag or untag an interface, it's going to automatically remove it from the default VLAN. So that's something that we don't need to do. So that's a pretty basic configuration. It, again, creates two VLANs, untags one interface in each VLAN, tags port 1/0/3 on both VLANs, and adds an IP address in order to route between those. So very basic configuration. You'll see that ours is, as I said, coming up, there's some ProVision or ProCurve equivalent configuration. You'll see that our configuration is very, very similar to ProCurve, but this Comware one is not really close to any of us, whether it's Cisco or ProVision or Brocade ICX. Anyway, that's it for today, and thanks for joining. Take care.